Authors Press.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Richardson and I'm from Authors Press. Today is October 7th, 2022. Welcome to another fantastic virtual interview where I'm gathered here today with Kenneth J. Sousa, the author of MAN-DAR of Atlantis. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Kenneth?
Well, I'm living here in South Florida. I'm actually 75 years old. I'm a Vietnam War veteran. I have a degree in communications from Boston University. I'm on my 7.5 books. This is a series, Man-DAR of Atlantis, of 3 Atlantis Man-DAR books. And I'm working the second one right now.
Could you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yes, Man-DAR takes place, as I said, 14,000 years ago in Atlantis. If you know who Edgar Cayce is, he was a philosopher and a healer back in the 20s and 30s. And he'd go into a trance with people who had illnesses, and he'd tell them how to fix their illnesses. While he was at that, he would tell them who they were and where they were in their past lives. And I have 5 books about people who he claimed came from Atlantis, and explains all about Atlantis. It's a high-tech society, so Man-DAR is going through adventures in a high-tech Atlantis.
Okay, I see. How did you come up with the idea for Man-DAR of Atlantis?
Well, part of it was being on a trip. I took a trip into Central America to search for clues of Atlantis. In one of Edgar Cayce's books, he states that there's 3 places where there is information about Atlantis and records. One of them in Egypt, one of them under the Atlantic Ocean, and the other one in the base of a pyramid in Central America. So I went down to Central America and started going through the pyramids. And when I got to Palenque, I went up a pyramid and then down into it, about 300 steps. At the bottom of the steps, there was a room with bars on it, but there was a sarcophagus with a picture of a man flying a spaceship. And I said, there it is. There's no spaceships at that time. This has to be a copy from Atlantis. And it was much better done than the Mayan things. It looked like it was done by a laser. And that's where the beginning of the book came from. Just before that, I had been in Mexico City, and I went to the Archaeological Museum, and I saw the different shaped heads of people who had fire. Some of them talked, and they were different types of people, like Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon. And I had read stories from The Lord of the Rings, if you remember that book. And these people existed in The Lord of the Rings, and I put the 3 of them together and came up with the idea of an adventure story about Man-DAR of Atlantis in the Atlantean time.
Okay, I see. So this book is definitely heavily into the Atlantis lore and story.
Yes. And how they lived, how they flew. They actually flew. They had hovercrafts that they drove around in. The rest of the world was sort of still wearing furs, like in Europe. They were wearing, furs. So the Atlanteans were way ahead of that.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I can definitely see the somewhat sci-fi-like aspect to it.
Yeah, because they are flying, and they did have satellites, so they could keep track of these creatures called the beasts, who they had to go to war with, because the beasts were trying to take over the world, and the Atlanteans had to fight against them. They had 3 wars with them, actually.
When did you write your first book? Is this your first book?
No, Man-DAR is my 7th book. My very first book I wrote in 1975, and it was published along with the second book, which was published in 1976. So I've published 4 books altogether now.
Okay, I see. Why did you become a writer?
Well, I had started off, in high school I used to get up and write down. And if I got an intensive dream, I'd get up and I'd write it down. That's actually when I started writing. I went to school for liberal arts, but I didn't do very well in the first, because I couldn't do the math in the first school that I went to, and I went to Northeastern University from there. And at the same time, I joined the 513th Maintenance Battalion, an Army Reserve unit. I also got married to my first wife, and in 1968, my reserve unit was activated and we were sent to Vietnam. So I was a sheet metal apprentice building ductwork that would go into a new building. And I moved up to where I was actually drawing the ductwork and placing it in the building. I didn't like it, and I didn't care too much for the people that I was working with. So at one point they laid me off, and they called me back to draw another building. And I said, no, I'm not going back to work until I know exactly what I want to do. And in about 3 months, I decided I wanted to be a writer. So I started with a pad and a pen and started writing, and realized I could barely read my own writing. So I started typing. And then I moved up through typing to computers. So I type everything on the computer now.
Huh. What was that?
I was going to say my last book is called Black Menace. That's out on Amazon and a few other programs now also.
Okay, thank you for telling us. I feel like you might have touched on this a little bit, but I'd like you to go a little bit deeper into it. What kind of work did you undertake in addition to writing?
In addition to writing, I was a bartender for about 6 years. I was a carpenter. I was a male exotic dancer for a year. I've done a lot of different jobs just so that I could take time to eat.
Seems like you've dipped your toes into a little bit of everything.
Oh, yes. It's not easy being a writer, unless somebody's paying you to do it. They weren't.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's not easy to be a writer. And on that note, did you get any education to aid you with your writing?
Yes, like I said, I did 4 years at Boston University, and got a degree in communications in 1985.
What was that? A degree of...
I got a degree in communications from Boston University.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I did that 81 to 85.
That's really cool.
I also got awards for audiovisual shows I wrote. I also wrote, produced, and directed a TV show that was on Channel 5 in Boston. Wow,
that's impressive. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Earlier, I heard you mention the Vietnam War. How did the Vietnam War affect your writing?
Actually, I didn't start really writing until after the war, but it changed my entire life. It destroyed my marriage. I lost my house, my dog, my picket fence, you name it. And at that point, I said, I don't want to go back to this sheet metal job. I want to do something that I want to do. And the decision was to write. So I just sat down and began writing. And a company from San Francisco saw some of my work, and they invited me out there to live and write my first novel.
Wow, that's really cool. What kind of environment do you like to write in? Do you have a specific environment that you prefer?
Yes, I like it quiet and dark and small. Just a small room is fine, as long as it's quiet and I can think.
And as long as you've got your computer.
And as long as I have the computer, yes.
Right, because you got to be able to read what you wrote.
Right.
What type of writing implements did you start with?
I started with just the pen and pad. That was it. And then I also had a small manual typewriter that I had for years. And that was not that easy to use. Well, eventually, I think my ex-wife gave me an old electric typewriter, and I started using that, which was better. And then she gave me her used computer when computers came in. And I've been writing on a computer ever since.
Okay, I feel like this definitely already answered that question, but is the computer your preferred implement?
Absolutely. And it has to be inside. I've tried writing outside. We have a cottage up in New Hampshire and by the lake, and I've been there where it was quiet. But outside, I don't seem to be able to connect with what I'm writing. So it has to be inside. And like I said, I prefer small rooms.
It's probably, it has a bit to do with the distractions, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. It's got to be, I'd like it completely quiet.
Yeah. Personally, when I write or doodle or things like that, I like to put on music that doesn't have any lyrics, like classical music.
No, any kind of music takes my mind away.
That's interesting.
Instead of, I'm writing things that happened 40,000 years ago, so I have to go deeply into my mind to come up with this to sound like I'm 14,000 years ago.
That's very interesting. Most people prefer not total silence, so I think it's very interesting you prefer silence.
Yeah, it's always been that way.
How many books have you written altogether?
I've written 7 books, 7.5 books. I've written a Christmas tree plaque, which is very well done. That comes out and sells at Christmas time. I've written newspaper articles, periodical articles. Quite a bit of writing, actually.
Okay. And how many of those works have been published total?
The four books have been published.
Okay. Do you plan to publish more?
Oh, yes. The MAN-DAR story is well, right now it's a trilogy, but it could be however many books I want to write about it. Because MAN-DAR has all kinds of stories that he can do. Because he's in his own world, and I can have all kinds of characters come about. So I could do 3 television series on MAN-DAR.
So you said that MAN-DAR is a series. Do you have to read the books in order, or could you read them as a standalone?
You can read them as a standalone, but they are connected. MAN-DAR is always the main character.
Okay, so
the other characters change.
Okay, that's very interesting. I've just got a couple more questions for you before we wrap this up.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention before we ended the interview?
Well, there are other characters. Selena, who MAN-DAR is in love with, but he's married to a very bad man, Karak. But they're both in the second book. Also, Lugar. Lugar is a Cro-Magnon man and the last of the Cro-Magnon race. They're called lessers in the book. And after they're slaves, but MAN-DAR's mission is to try to free the slaves. So what they're going to do is go back to the heart of Atlantis, which lets them take their body and spirit and go back to their spirit world. But the Atlanteans keep them from doing that. So MAN-DAR's job is to try to free the lessers.
Okay, I see. And for my final question, I'd just like to know, is this the first time you've worked with Authors Press?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and how do you feel about this so far?
I feel very good about it. I know that I'm getting out there. It's necessary for me to get my name out there so that some of my other books will be published. The book I have on post-traumatic stress disorder is about me. And if nobody knows who I am, why would they bother reading about me having post-traumatic stress disorder? So
Right, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And therefore, some of the other books that I have can come after it.
Okay, I see. Do you have any advice for Authors Press?
Do more of these interviews and hope that I can get a tutor that will you see me.
I do enjoy doing these interviews, so I will definitely take that to heart.
That'd be very nice. But this next book, the first MAN-DAR book is very good, and I'm more than halfway through the second one, and it's better. So
Yeah, the cover is very pretty.
yeah.
I was looking at the cover myself, and I do enjoy looking at it. I like that it doesn't look like most book covers that you see.
No, because it's a different place. You know.
Yeah, it's a different place, and
Yeah.
I like this. It's simple, but it's also got a lot of details where it's needed, like in the ship.
Yeah. It was very difficult. It was very difficult in a sense to get companies like yours to understand that this isn't an Atlantis that sunk under the water. This is an actual story that's going on in Atlantis, and people just have a hard time dealing with that.
Yeah, I see. That's all the questions that I have for you today. Thank you so much for meeting with me.
Oh, I really appreciate it.
If you have any questions or concerns for Authors Press, please feel free to reach out either via phone number or email, and we're more than happy to help.
I appreciate that also, and I will do it.
This has been Kenneth J. Sousa and Nicole Richardson. Thank you so much for tuning in.